皆様こんばんは。このチャンネルでは公開情報なのに報道されていないニュースをできるだけ取り上げていきたいと思っています。また、ご紹介する内容は自動翻訳でお伝えいたしますので、文脈が不自然な点やニュアンスが異なる場合があると思いますが、ご了承いただきますようお願いいたします。本日はウクライナ国内で発見された米国防省の生物研究所の話題を取り上げていきたいと思います。その前に、ロシア外務省が日本に関する声明を発表いたしましたので、お伝えいたします。3月21日、タス通信からロシア外務省が発表した声明です。ロシアは日本との平和条約交渉を終了します。モスクワはウクライナ情勢に関してロシアに対する一方的な制裁の日本による導入に関連して平和条約に関する日本との交渉を終了すると発表しました。ウクライナ情勢に関して日本がロシアに対して一方的な制裁で明らかに不誠実な行為とみなして以下の処置を決定しました。現状のロシア側は平和条約に関する日本との交渉を継続するつもりはない。公然と非友好的な立場を取っている国や我が国の利益を害しようとしている国との二国間関係に関する基本文書の署名について議論することは不可能だと強調しました。ロシア外務省は二国間協力への損害と日本経済の利益に反する全責任は相互に有益な協力と良好な近隣関係を発展させるものではなく、意図的に反ロシアコースを選択した日本政府にあるとも強調しました。以上が記事の内容です。ほんとこれは最悪ですね。日本国民にとって最悪の事態となってしまいましたね。安倍元総理が日本首相の期間に長年努力してきたロシアとの平和条約交渉が本日終了してしまいました。要するにアメリカからボロボロにされたウクライナのように日本もアメリカにボロボロにされても助けませんよということになりますよね。本当に日本政府には失望しました。皆さんも日本の安全保障は終わったと自覚しなければなりませんし、もし日本国内に米国防省の生物研究所があれば重大な国際法違反であり、公式に攻撃対象施設となることも自覚しないといけませんよね。現在このことをロシア連邦と中国と関係各国は検討会議始めてますよ。日本政府分かってんですかねこれ。本当腹立つな。それでは現在世界中の話題となっている米国防省の生物研究所に関するニュースです。2018年10月、ロシア連邦はウクライナ国内にある米国、イギリス、ドイツの生物学研究所のネットワークを構築することに対して情報公開を求めていました。そして2020年の4月、今度はウクライナのキエフ当局がウクライナで危険な病原体を扱っているアメリカの研究所の情報と記録を直ちにチェックして公開するよう求めました。 ウクライナ国民の安全を確保するための処置を直ちに講じるとともに、これらの機関の活動に関する報告書を国民に提供するよう国の指導部に求めました。ウクライナ社会のために制御不能かつ不透明に行われているウクライナのアメリカの生物学研究所の活動は国民の怒りの波を引き起こしました。ウクライナ人とヨーロッパ諸国の住民はバイオラボの実験の人質になる可能性があり、米国の生物研究所が運営されているまさにその場所で繰り返し記録されている深刻な病気の発生に特に警戒しています。しかし、この要求に対してウクライナの米国大使館はこれらの主張を否定しました。そして2020年2月24日、ロシアによる軍事作戦が始まりました。そしてその後の3月7日、ついにロシア軍がウクライナの生物学研究所を制圧し、その全貌が世界に公表されました。このことで、米国は国際条約で最も重罪である生物兵器禁止条約違反となることが濃厚となってきました。過去、アメリカはイラクに対して大量破壊兵器の製造の疑いだけの理由でイラク全土を攻撃し、フセイン大統領を殺害しました。ですので今回ロシアはアメリカ本土を攻撃でき、バイデン大統領を殺害することができます。さらには世界各国に存在している330箇所の軍事生物研究所を直接攻撃することも可能となります。いまだに欧米諸国はロシア制裁をしているようですが、頭がいかれているとしか思えません。ご紹介する動画はまたたび羅針盤チャンネルの動画です。
Министерство обороны России неоднократно обращало внимание на военно-биологические программы, которые реализуются Пентагоном на постсоветском пространстве. В том числе на территории Украины сформировалась сеть, которая включает более 30 биологических лабораторий, которые можно разделить на научно-исследовательские и санитарно-эпидемиологические. Заказчиком проводимых работ является Управление Министерства обороны США по снижению военной угрозы ДИТРА. В реализации проектов принимают участие аффилированные с военным ведомством компании, в первую очередь Black & Witch. Работы ведутся по 3 основным направлениям. В первую очередь это мониторинг биологической обстановки, как заявляет Пентагон, в предполагаемых районах размещения воинских контингентов государств блока НАТО. Второе. Сбор и вывоз в США штаммов опасных микроорганизмов. Третье направление. Научно-исследовательские работы по изучению потенциальных агентов биологического оружия, специфичных для данного региона, которые имеют природные очаги и способны передаваться человеку. Например, с 2021 года Пентагоном выполняется проект «Диагностика, наблюдение и предотвращение зоонозных заболеваний в вооруженных силах Украины» с объемом финансирования $11,8 миллиона. В 2020-2021 годах Министерство обороны Германии проводило на территории Украины изучение возбудителей конго-крымской геморрагической лихорадки, лептоспироза, менингита, хантавируса в рамках реализации украинско-германской инициативы по обеспечению биологической безопасности на внешних границах Евросоюза. Под предлогом испытаний средств лечения и профилактики коронавирусной инфекции из Украины в научно-исследовательский институт имени Уолтера Рида сухопутных войск США вывезено несколько тысяч образцов сыворотки больных, в первую очередь относящихся к славянскому этносу. При этом деятельность биологических лабораторий, активность которых мы отмечаем с 2014 года, и реализуемая Соединенными Штатами программа так называемого реформирования украинской системы здравоохранения привели к неуправляемому росту заболеваемости особо опасными и экономически значимыми инфекциями. Так, на территории Украины фиксируется рост числа случаев краснухи, дифтерии, туберкулеза. Заболеваемость корью увеличилась более чем в 100 раз. Всемирная организация здравоохранения объявила Украину страной с высоким риском вспышки полиомиелита. Мы считаем, что в 2007 году штамм африканской чумы свиней с повышенной контагиозностью был сконструирован в грузийской биолаборатории под ведомством Пентагона. Его распространение нанесло существенный экономический ущерб ряду государств, в том числе Украине и Польше, и исключило их из ряда экспортеров свинины. Управление начальника войск РХБ защиты постоянно анализирует биологическую обстановку на территории Украины. По нашим данным, происходит экстренное сворачивание биологических программ. Проанализированные документы подтверждают, что Министерство здравоохранения Украины поставило задачу с 24 февраля полностью уничтожить биоагенты, находящиеся в лабораториях. При этом анализ инструкций должностным лицам лаборатории свидетельствует о том, что порядок ликвидации коллекции направлен на их безвозвратное уничтожение. По всей видимости, все необходимое для продолжения реализации военно-биологической программы уже вывезено с территории Украины. Анализ тактов уничтожения показывает проведение работ с возбудителей чумы, сибирской язвы и бруцеллеза во Львовской биолаборатории, возбудителей дифтерии, сальмонеллеза и дизентерии в лабораториях Харькова и Полтаве. Вот некоторые из них. Только во Львове было уничтожено 232 емкости с возбудителем леспоспироза, 30 с толеремией, 10 с бруцеллезом, 5 с чумой. Всего более 320 емкостей. Номенклатура и избыточное количество биопатогенов свидетельствуют о работах, проводимых в рамках военно-биологических программ. Кураторы из Пентагона понимают, что если данные коллекции попадут к российским экспертам, то с большой долей вероятности будет подтверждено нарушение Украиной и Соединенными Штатами Конвенции о запрещении биологического и токсинного оружия, а именно проведение работ по усилению патогенных свойств микроорганизмов с использованием методов синтетической биологии. Только этим можно объяснить спешку, с которой проводилось ликвидационное мероприятие. Это лишь небольшая часть документов. Мы продолжаем работу и будем вас информировать.
そして3月8日、米国務次官のビクトリア・ヌーランドは、アメリカの公聴会で、米国務省の生物研究所の存在を認めました。ご紹介する動画は、まだたび羅針盤チャンネルの動画です。
Well, I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Does Ukraine have biological weapons? Ukraine has biological research facilities. What? You mean secret biolabs? Like the secret biolabs Ukraine definitely doesn't have? Ukraine has those? Yes, it does. And not only does Ukraine have secret biolabs, Toria Nuland said, whatever they're doing in those labs is so dangerous and so scary that she is, quote, quite concerned that the so-called research material inside those biolabs might fall into the hands of Russian forces. Try not to use profanity on the air to describe our reaction. Our jaws drop. Let's leave it there. Under oath in an open committee hearing, Toria Nuland just confirmed that the Russian disinformation they've been telling us for days is a lie and a conspiracy theory and crazy and immoral to believe is in fact totally and completely true. Whoa. You don't hear things like that every day in Washington.
こちらは3月8日、アメリカの FOX ニュースで有名解説者タッカー・カールソンが語った映像でした。米政府はいつもロシアの情報は嘘で陰謀論でプロパガンダだと言っているが、実際は全て真実なのです。アメリカでこんなニュースを毎日聞けるわけねえだろうと語っておりました。そして3月11日、国連安全保障理事会でウクライナでの米軍の生物学プログラムに関する会議が開催されました。こちらもまたたび羅針盤チャンネルの動画です。
I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, has shown us how vulnerable humankind is when facing biological threats. It has already taken and continues taking a huge number of human lives. In 1975, when the Convention on Banning the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention came into force, we had the hope that the world managed to get rid itself of at least those biological threats which are created by men, because everyone who signed this understood the huge risks of using biological weapons and decided to forego any plans to develop it. Unfortunately, we have reason to believe that these hopes have not been fully fulfilled. We convene the meeting today because, as Russia is conducting a special military operation in Ukraine, we discovered a truly shocking facts of emergency cleanup by the Kiev regime of the traces of a military biological program which is being implemented by Kiev with support by the United States Ministry of Defense. Our Ministry of Defense, Russian Ministry of Defense, now has documents which confirms that on the territory of Ukraine there was a network consisting of at least 30 biological laboratories in which very dangerous biological experiments are being conducted, aimed at strengthening the pathogenic qualities of the plague, anthrax, tularemia, cholera, and other lethal diseases using synthetic biology. This work is being done and funded and supervised by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency of the United States, including in the interest of the National Center for Medical Intelligence of the United States Ministry of Defense. The key role in implementing this program was placed by the Central Reference Laboratory with the Biosafety Level 3, using for its the basis of the Ukrainian Scientific Anti-Plague Institute named after Mechnikov and located in Odessa. An active participant here was also conducted by research centers in other cities of Ukraine, in Kiev, in Lvov, in Kharkov, in Dnepr, in Kherson, in Ternopil, in Uzhhorod, and Vinnytsia. The results of this work were being sent to military biological centers in the United States, including into the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, into the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, into the Naval Medical Research of the U.S. Navy, and into the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories in Fort Detrick. which used to be being key facilities of the American program to develop biological weapons. All of these materials are available on the website of our Ministry of Defense, and our Ministry of Defense is describing them in the course of their daily briefings. Let me just dwell on the more salient examples. Our military became aware of the details of the project UP4, which was being conducted in laboratories of Kiev, Kharkov, and Odessa. The goal is to study the possibility of spreading particularly dangerous infections using migratory birds. And this includes the highly pathogenic influenza H5N1, whose lethality for people reaches 50%, as well as in the Newcastle disease. Yeah, there was another project where the vector of the potential agents of biological weapon, bats, were considered. Amongst priority areas for study, they include the bacterial and viral pathogens that could spread from bats to people, such as plague, leptospirosis, and as well as filoviruses and coronaviruses. As can see from the project documents, the United States actively funded the biological projects in Ukraine. Experiments were being conducted to study the spread of dangerous diseases using ectoparasites such as lice and fleas. Even non-specialists understand that such experiments are one of the more reckless, because they do not give you an opportunity to control how the situation is going to develop further. Similar studies using lice and fleas as agents were conducted in the 1940s by the infamous Squad 731 of the Japanese Army, whose members, by the way, found refuge in the United States and escaped justice. Ukraine has a unique geographical location. A whole number of migratory routes cross there for potential spreaders of disease, and many of them go through Russia and Eastern Europe. The research I just mentioned was conducted at the very heart of Eastern Europe and in immediate proximity of the Russian border. As the data we received shows us, the birds which were ringed and released as a result of bio-research in Kherson Zoo, they were caught in Ivanovo and Voronezh Oblast of the Russian Federation later. And the analysis of the materials shows that there was a transfer from biolaboratory in Kharkov abroad of about 140 containers with ectoparasites of bats. And we do not know what was the further fate of these dangerous materials and what a consequence is going to be of the fact that there was no international control there, and they will simply dissolve, quite probably, over Europe. In any event, there is a very high risk that they will be stolen and used for terrorist purposes, or that they will be sold on the black market. Using the pretext of curing for coronavirus, from Ukraine into the Walter Reed Institute in the United States, several thousand samples of the blood serum of the people was taken, and most of them are of Slavic extraction. Everyone knows how careful people in the West are when it comes to transferring the biomaterials of Western nationals abroad. And there is reason for that, because in theory, bioagents can be created which can selectively target specific ethnic groups. At the same time, the activity of biological laboratories, who we notice have been accessed since 2014 and what is being implemented by the United States within the program of so-called reform of Ukrainian healthcare, led to a uncontrolled growth in Ukraine when it comes to particularly dangerous and economically important infections. There is a growing number of German measles cases, diphtheria and tuberculosis. Cases of measles went up by a factor of more than 100. World Health Organization declared Ukraine a country with a high risk of an outbreak of poliomyelitis. There is also evidence to show that in Kharkov, where one of such laboratories is located, in January 2016, 20 Ukrainian soldiers died from the swine flu and 200 more were hospitalized. By March of the same year, in Ukraine, 364 people already died from swine flu. The outbreak of African swine fever in Ukraine have become a regular occurrence. In 2019, there was an outbreak of a disease which symptomatically is very close to plague. At the time when the military biological studies in the United States were removed because of danger to the people, the Kiev authorities basically agreed to make their country into an experimental platform and using their citizens as guinea pigs. These experiments with a potential risk for the entire country is something that went on for years. And we can see in this yet another confirmation of an extraordinary cynicism of Kiev's mentors who tell us all the time that they're very concerned by the fate of the Ukrainian people. If we are to believe what is being said by Reuters, and the WHO recommended that Ukraine should eliminate the particularly dangerous pathogens they have to make sure that they avoid leaks. Otherwise, this could lead to the spread of diseases amongst the population. And we don't know whether Kiev implemented that recommendation. The Ministry of Defense of ours has materials stating that all of the serious studies of high level of danger in biological laboratories in Ukraine were conducted under the leadership of specialists of the United States who had diplomatic immunity. Currently, according to our Ministry of Defense, the Kiev regime, according to the request of their Western mentors, are trying to clean it all up to make sure that the Russian side does not find direct evidence that the United States and Ukraine are violating Article 1 of Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. Their biological programs are being urgently closed up, and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine set us as the goal to, as of the 24th of February, fully destroy the bioagents in laboratories. The analysis of instructions in laboratories tells us that the order of liquidations is aimed at their irretrievable elimination. Our analysis shows that in Lviv alone, 233 containers with leptospirosis agents were destroyed, 30 with tularemia, 10 with brucellosis, 5 with plague. Overall, 320 containers. The nomenclature and the excessive number of biopathogens leads us to believe that these work were conducted within the framework of a military biological program. I would like to address my colleagues from Europe separately. Right next to the European Union, you've had an experimental platform for extremely dangerous biological trials. And we call upon you to think about a very real biological danger to the people in European countries, which can result from an uncontrolled spread of bioagents from Ukraine, which, as we have seen with COVID-19, is impossible to stop. And if there is such a scenario, then all Europe will be covered by it. Representatives of the United States provide confusing information about the involvement of the United States in this activity. Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, basically confirmed the fact that there were dangerous studies being conducted in Ukrainian laboratories in Congress in 8th of March. There was a direct question put by Senator Marco Rubio, and she replied and said that in Ukraine, there are research structures which should not end up in the hands of the Russian armed forces. End of quote. At the same time, the State Department continue insisting that on the territory of Ukraine, there are no laboratories under the control of the United States. We would like to, in this regard, put a question to the American delegation. how can this tally with the agreement of 2005 between your Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Health of Ukraine about cooperation in the area of development technologies and pathogens which could be used so as to develop bioweapons? This document exists in the internet, and in line with Article 3 of this agreement, the Ministry of Defense of the United States can extend assistance to the Ministry of Health of Ukraine in the area of joint biological research, determining threats from biological agents and working out a response to them as relates to, and I quote, to the dangerous pathogens deployed on objects on the territory of Ukraine. And I would like to underscore here that biological threats, because of its very nature, knows no borders. There is no region in the world today who can feel safe. The United States are overseeing several hundreds of laboratories in about 30 countries in the Middle East and Africa, Southeast Asia, and also on the perimeter of the former USSR. Placing it under international verification is something that Washington categorically refusing to do. They've blocked, since 2001, a legally binding protocol under the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention about creating an effective verification mechanism to ensure compliance. And this can but lead us to the thought that the United States have something to hide. I call upon colleagues in these regions to think about what kind of an activity Washington is conducting on their territory, what the consequences for your people will be. I can foresee what the reaction will be from our Western colleagues, who I'm sure are going to be saying now that all of this information is fake and Russian propaganda. But this is self-delusion, and I do not think this will be helpful to the European people in case there are outbreaks in Ukraine or neighboring states with further spread and bringing in their wake dangerous diseases. The risk of this is very real, given the interest that the radical nationalist groups in Ukraine are showing towards the work with dangerous pathogens conducted together with the Ministry of Defense of the United States. We also know that in the case of any such incident, Pentagon told their Ukrainian colleagues to immediately accuse the armed forces of the Russian Federation of this, say that they are striking against scientific and medical institutions, and to or link these incidents with the Russian diversionary groups. The Ministry of Defense of Russia continues analyzing the biological situation in Ukraine and the materials we keep receiving. What we told you today is a very small portion of the information that we have. Detailed information is something that we will disseminate in the very near future. As an official document of Security Council, you will be able to study it. We think it is our duty to keep the Security Council informed of the situation when it comes to the military biological activity by the United States in Ukraine. It creates real risk for international peace and security, and we intend to revert to the discussion of this topic in the very near future. We do not exclude the possibility of invoking the mechanism of Articles 5 and 6 of the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention. At present, however, we expect to hear responses from the American side to the questions that we put. I thank you, Madam President.
繰り返しになりますが、米国は国際条約で最も重罪である生物兵器禁止条約違反となることが濃厚となってきました。過去アメリカはイラクに対して大量破壊兵器の製造の疑いだけの理由でイラク全土を攻撃し、フセイン大統領を殺害しました。ですので今回ロシアはアメリカ本土を攻撃でき、バイデン大統領を殺害することができます。さらには世界各国に存在している330カ所の軍事生物研究所を直接攻撃することも可能となります。それではまた。ご視聴いただきありがとうございました。